My name is Kelli Potter. I studied philosophy. Started out in fine art, but they didn't like me, so I went to philosophy. And graduated in 93. I went on a mission, so started in 87. So I had a scholarship to the New York School of Visual Arts, and I had a scholarship to BYU, better scholarship to BYU, and my parents wouldn't pay for rent in New York, so that was, they really wanted me to go to BYU because, they wanted me to do the paint by numbers thing, right? I don't think I regret going to BYU. I do regret staying in Mormonism for as long as I did, but I don't think I regret going to BYU. Or even going on my mission, which was a really good experience, despite the, having to deal with other missionaries. I loved the Portuguese people, but the other missionaries, I don't know, BYU was, it was a hard time of my life because it was right after, so I kind of realized I was trans when I just got back from my mission. Like within a week or 2 weeks, I had this experience that was like almost an epiphany where I realized I was trans, and I thought about it that night, thinking about like transitioning, even though that was not something people were doing in 1990, at least not that I knew of. Decided consciously, okay, this is not something that I'm ever going to divulge. I'm going to my death with this, right? I was okay with being open about being bisexual, but I wasn't about being trans. I felt like that was somehow something horrible about me, or something sexual, or something, a paraphilic thing or something. One of my really pleasant experiences was interviewing Cecilia Farr when they basically denied her tenure for, she had come out as pro-choice, but she had been vocal about it, wrote an editorial, and then they said, oh, well, your publications aren't enough, we're not going to give you continuing status, right? And so I interviewed her for the student review, and that was a good experience. It was a good experience to be involved in the activist groups on campus. I met a lot of the really cool feminists back in the 90s, like Margaret Toscano, who's continued to be a friend to this day, and others. And yeah, I had a lot of good experience. I mean, I have a lot of good memories about BYU. I have a memory, I can admit this now because, the honor code office can't get me. But like a bunch of us, my gay friends, we all went up to Squatters and tried out all the little beers that they had, those little, and then went and watched Peter Greenaway's The Cook, the Thief, His Wife, and Her Lover. That was kind of like whoa, that film was pretty intense for me at this point in my life because I was so young, but it was a good experience. So I had a lot of great experiences at BYU. But of course, the administration was problematic. Some of the faculty were, especially in the religion department, and the church part I just had such a hard time with. And there was a lot of good discussion on campus when I was there. The Student Review was still a newspaper. I wrote for it sometimes. Cecilia Farr was still there, the feminist who was fired. And David Knowlton was still there, and Mike Quinn had only left like a little bit earlier, like just right before I got there. But I pushed down being trans, repressed it, I got married in the temple while I was at BYU to a heterosexual woman who, if she had known that it wouldn't have happened, but I was hiding it from everybody, and consciously, like I knew this is who I am, but I did not feel at all safe to come out. In fact, I kind of felt bad about myself because of the images in the media back then of trans women, dissociated from my sexuality for the, however long I was in graduate school. I came back to teach at UVU, and my marriage fell apart and stuff, and some other kind of setbacks in my career happened at the same time. And because I sort of was at rock bottom, it was around then that I started exploring my gender identity more, and came out as genderqueer first, and then later trans woman. I had bad depression. I was also having dysphoria and didn't know what it was. I mean, I didn't understand that. And it was hard to cope with it because I wanted long hair and I was at BYU. And yeah, I had pretty bad depression then. So that's what I would say is depression. In fact, I started on Prozac when I was at BYU. And I've been on antidepressants since then. Oh, it was hard. I don't even know how I stayed. I just didn't believe the theology the way that most Mormons do. There were certain things I didn't believe at all, like the temple. I just completely rejected. I had a traumatic experience going through it the first time. So, like, I didn't teach all of the discussions. I actually would only teach the stuff that I agreed with. That I don't know how I stayed in the mission, because I refused to do certain things, and it was hard. And I knew I just didn't fit in with everyone else, and yeah. None of my companions that I know now, that all of them have left the church too, they're not queer though. But they all knew. Like when I came out as trans, they're like, yeah, of course. I'm in it. Well, it's right to say that I'm non-religious, but not non-spiritual. I'm influenced by Buddhism, the way I see the world, to some extent, but I also am very critical of certain aspects of it. So I wouldn't necessarily call myself a Buddhist. But for me, my orientation to the world that replaces sort of that spiritual framework that I had with Mormonism is one that is very focused on now, right? I think of now as like eternal, as if we're living it over and over and over again. And so I want to live, in this life, not for some other life. I actually don't know a lot about what it would be like for a student today, although I do know that there are people who are out on campus. There were people who were out back then. In fact, one of my friends, they were trying to kick him out, despite the fact that he went to church at least 80% of the time to make sure that he could stay in school. They wanted to kick him out because in church he would be open about being gay and challenge stuff in Sunday school and so on. I mean, if you had to be there, you might as well, make arguments. And they were going to kick him out, but he just called the ACLU, and the next thing everyone knew, they didn't do anything. Like, they just left him, right? And most of my other friends it was the gay boys that I hung out with. Most of them were pretty open about it. Like, I think most people knew. But at the same time, though, there was a lot of animosity towards people who were gay, and just animosity to students who didn't toe the line on other things. I was involved in a lot of political activism on campus at the time, like the Response Club, Eco Response Club, which was an environmental club, and Voice, the feminist club, and like I said, the Student Review, and so on. And there was quite a bit of tension politically on campus, and like a divide between Mormon kids that are coming from outside the state that were really interested in like a real education, and people who, well, I don't want to belittle, but who were going to get married and get an education at the same time, but the whole point was living a conservative Mormon life, right? And I was straddling that, right, trying to kind of do it. And yeah, I mean, giving advice is so hard. I might say don't be afraid to be yourself. Don't wait to be happy.